Thank you, Prof. Ong, for the kind introduction. First of all, I would like to convey my thanks to the organizers, SRD and Wrexham, for giving me this opportunity to share a research that a team from UKM is working on with regard to climate change and education. So I suppose what I'm going to share here is relevant to the theme that Prof. Ong is chairing, pedagogy and teacher education to some extent. So basically this talk is on conceptual arguments for what we refer to transformative education as a means to address the impact of climate change. Right, you can see some photos on this slide, and before I elaborate on the photos, the definition of climate change is be defined as the change of patterns in terms of humidity, weather, wind, and season across a year. And scientists have found that there is an increase of the Earth's temperature globally for the past 30 years. So this picture tells about climate change and its impact. I hope there are 3 inferences that we could take away by looking at this picture. First, I think we see around the world, we are experiencing consistent extreme weather like floods, droughts, and unpredictable rainfalls and seasons. So scientists believe this is as a result of the impact of climate change, where globally the temperature is warming up, and that increases the sea level rise, that brings to erosion of land, and so on. So I think that's the first inference that I hope all of us can take away by looking into at these pictures. Second, it doesn't say in this picture, but we can make an inference that it does not only threaten the environment, but it also affects indirectly on the economy, political, and society of the nation and as a global as a whole. In other words, we are also going to face food and water security, health, agriculture, and to some extent education and health. The third message I suppose that we could take away from this picture is that climate change does not occur every day or every hour like weather forecast, but it is like a silent killer. We only experience its impact after years of climate change in terms of temperature. And for us, Malaysia, or those who are at the equator, where we always face hot weather or high temperatures, we are still not able to see or feel the impact because it's part of our life, everyday life. So it is more difficult to see or to experience this silent killer until the silent killer has shown its impact as shown as in this picture. So I would like to begin my presentation in that way. So what is the solution? The common perception is that we could solve this problem through scientists and the government, because from this perspective, indirectly, the values that we put to the environment is known as technoism, meaning we can do something on the environment. That means we need to develop, but at the same time, after development, we also need to mitigate it by having finding solution through science and technologies such as green technology or renewable energy, whatever means as to lessen the impact of the environment that we have used to develop our nation. So, but actually, the reality is that a citizen in any country needs to be aware that they are part of the problem and also solution to this climate change phenomena. It's because our activities actually contribute to the emission of CO2 that leads to global warming, and as a result of that, the temperature rise, and as shown, and the impact is as shown as the picture earlier. So how, for example, if we were to adopt an environmental conservation behavior, and that involves mitigating and also employing adaptation strategies, that would entail us as citizen not only to have the knowledge, not only to have the attitude, but now is more on developing values and skills that would allow us to understand each other and be self-disciplined, and that leads to an action for local and global good. So our argument is that we need to strengthen the capacity building in terms of addressing this climate change. Right, so the point here is that strengthening capacity building in terms of global competencies would probably address this climate change impact to climate change education, especially for school students, is very vital. So what are the current issues and challenges? I believe that all countries would have some policies on national climate change. The only thing is that, like HAIS and in Malaysia, from our examination of the policy, we found that they only target public government agencies and industries, but not necessarily on education to address these climate change issues. Thus, Byler is from Canada, found that their educational policy is not aligned with the country's CC policies. So we believe that the lack of congruence between these two policies is probably insufficient to sensitize people of the significance of the problem, other than, as we mentioned earlier, about the climate change impact as a silent killer. Okay. So how has it been addressed? Also another challenge issue is we do a lot of environmental education, and it's as part of CC is climate change education, but it has limitations. Because from the review, we found that environmental education or caring just for the environment is not as in-depth and as needed in the climate change mitigation adaptation strategies, because in climate change we not only talk about the environment, but we talk about the societal impact, the political impact, the community concern. So it is beyond just the caring for the environment. And we have done a lot of studies on environment education, and it seems that it's still ineffective. And as a result, because we see that the level of commitment of the environment is low. So these are some of the challenges if we want to address climate change. Even if we have environmental education, we see that the commitment is still low, despite having good knowledge or attitude on EE. So the current trends in addressing climate change with respect to education, UNESCO has come up with three main competences, and it is global competences, but before going global, we also need to develop this locally. So the first competence is regarding cognitive, and they have specified specifically knowledge and critical thinking about global to local issues and how it's interconnected, because climate change is a global issue, and it interrelates with local and global level as a whole. So how education can address this? we've seen, we are not saying that it has not addressed, but it needs to be enhanced. These competencies are infused throughout the curriculum, but it has to be in the form of a transformative pedagogical, in which it is not only the common or the usual way of teaching. It has probably need some more of role play, more of experiential, more of hands-on and active participation, but in the context of climate change. And to do that, we also need to inculcate civic values that needed, as I say, is a combination of science knowledge, civic values, and critical thinking to address this global issue. The other global competence, the second one is probably is a detail of what's meant about what sort of values that we need to inculcate with relation to climate change. And so far we found in the literature competencies related to an ecological citizen would involve, among others, empathy, responsibility, respect, collaboration, and these are not usually measured in the examination. So we are looking ways on how to inculcate and also be part of the measurement. That's part of the research that we are working on. And of course, as I said earlier, knowledge, values, attitudes do not necessarily transform into behavior. That is, in this case, we want the students to act responsibly, have the responsibility to act for local and global good. And to do that, we are suggesting, based on the literature, that their learning experiences are not only passive, but participatory and engage with authentic climate change scenarios. We can talk about some climate change impact abroad, but it does not relate to their situation. So we are developing some authentic climate change scenarios, like if those in Malaysia, we are looking at Klang, urban heat issue, and Kuala Selangor, where the sea level rise has occurred and has affected the plantation and the economy of the community then. And then we will bring these scenarios for deliberation for the students to think critically about the complex issues related to their local situation, and also heightening up to the level of global, and as I say again, with relation to social justice or human rights as suggested by the literature. So I'm coming to the last three slides. What we are suggesting, that we need a transformative education that can address this climate change, that would involve encouraging students to change the society and commit to act. We want them to act and not only to think about it. To do that, we need a positive disposition and affect toward people of diverse backgrounds, and this can only be done through experiential learning. What we mean experiential learning here is that, as we know, the impact of climate change does not occur now. It may occur 20 years ago, 20 years in the future. And to bring that experience, we are trying to use AR, augmented reality, which we've seen some on the television where there was, we use a lot of AR, but this is going to be very specific to what the students have experienced themselves. So we are suggesting that this transformative education should focus not only on the competencies, but also related civic values that will contribute changes in their behavior towards climate change and its impact. And when we say identify competencies and civic values, we are doing at the local level, in which Malaysia, as we know, is consists of ethnic, and as Rohan suggested, that one values are closely associated with their own worldviews, and we need to need to this is the last slide. So we have gone through some literature and we found that climate change literacy has not been has been done abroad, but less in the Malaysian context, and we believe that this literacy will link to the pro-environmental behavior that we are looking into, and it's not only at the public level. They'll do a lot on at the public level. It should go down all the way to preschool level so that it can be mitigated earlier, as my second last point, so that the changes could be addressed earlier. And we found that also social media can play a positive role in promoting or pro-environmental behavior, and that should be explored. So thank you for listening, and welcome any feedback. Over to you, Prof. Ong. Okay.
All right, thank you, Prof. Lilia Halim, for a very enlightening presentation on particularly climate change and how education could be transformed in step with the current situation.